Hello, it's Jen, and you are listening to /watching the Patreon exclusive plus extra bonus episode of Lobotomy World. If you haven't watched the new public episode yet, you can do that over on the YouTube channel or here on the Patreon. But what are we talking about here today? Well, I've got a few different topics that I kind of want to reel off. Last time we talked quite heavily about George Santos, and since then I've been doing a bit of like a deep dive on George Santos's podcast, which I'm obsessed with his podcast. If you don't know, George Santos has a podcast, right, that he started relatively recently. And it's a really weird podcast. It's got high production values, like better than this. But what it is him on a sofa with a co-host who I think she's like, at least relative to him, she's quite liberal. And I think that's the whole point. It's like, you know, he's brought her in to be like this, you know, this is a combative voice. And she is quite combative to him, to be fair. I actually quite like her. I don't know I'm not sure who she is. I'll have to like look into it a bit more. But she seems nice. And I like her because she does seem to challenge him quite a lot. But they have like a good rapport and stuff. Anyway, like he's had this podcast for a while, I've seen, and he's had some big guests on there. He's had people on there that I really like, actually, like Taylor Lorenz. If you don't know Taylor Lorenz, I love Taylor Lorenz. I'm a Lorenz head. Taylor Lorenz, she's like she's an independent journalist, but she used to work for like I think the New York Times, and she came up really big on like Tumblr and stuff. She writes a lot about pop culture and the internet and stuff. Her Substack Power User is really great, and she has a podcast called Power User. You should check it out. One thing I really love about Taylor Lorenz actually is, in particular, is like a interview that she had with Libs of TikTok, where, in my opinion, she really gracefully sort of showed Libs of TikTok, like showed her up, like showed her for what she is, which is obviously a horrible piece of shit. But yeah, so George Santos had Taylor Lorenz on and lots of other people. But what's baffling to me, and listen, I'm no expert at getting views and doing a podcast. I'm no expert at marketing and stuff. But George Santos is a prolific bullshitter. Like, he's known for like wheedling his way into positions that he shouldn't have. And he has a big public profile, you know? He's in the news frequently, but the views on his podcast are so bad. Like, they're so low. And it's like, why? There's no excuse. And also there's no excuse because the podcast is an absolute train wreck. Like, it's perfect. It's great viewing. Like, it's not good in terms of like, it's not like in its own right entertaining, but with everything going on right now, with like the fact that he is going to jail, and there's an episode where like apparently they say, like, I watched it, you don't get to see it in the episode, but it says on the description of the episode that he found out that he was going to jail halfway through this podcast. And well, not that he was going to jail, he found out how long he was potentially going to jail for, which is like 8 years, 7-8 years. But he knew he was going to jail on this podcast episode, but the podcast episode is him getting advice from former inmates on like how to protect himself and hold himself in prison. It's bizarre. It's really, really odd. And I just kind of wanted to talk about it because I'm obsessed with it. I feel like I might have to make a video about it in the future. I don't know how much time I'll have. I'm still sort of working on this trigonometry video, which is taking me quite a long time. The reason it's taking me quite a long time is because, you know, to make a video about a podcast and like compile all the clips and find the best clips and stuff like that, that means you have to watch the podcast. It means you have to watch a lot of it. And unfortunately, for me, I find the trigonometry podcast, although I find it morbidly fascinating, in terms of practically actually watching it, it's unbearable. Like, you can't have two more disgraceful, annoying, arrogant co-hosts. Like, it really is a slog to get through, basically. But you have to do it. If you're going to be in this game, if you're going to make videos and stuff, you just have to watch it. And I'm not one of those people that I can't really watch things on like double speed. Sometimes if I'm listening to a podcast or an audiobook or something, sometimes I'll listen to it maybe 1.5 speed. But that only really works if it's like a factual thing. And even then, I'm like, does it really work? Because with audiobooks, I like audiobooks. I'm not an audiobook snob. I don't look down on people who use audiobooks. I use them myself. I think they're a great service. And I also think that some audiobooks are better than the book itself. For example, I know you're not supposed to like him anymore, but before, and with good reason, before Neil Gaiman was, it might not surprise you to know that before Neil Gaiman was exposed for being a mega creep, sexual assaulting wrong'un, I was quite a big fan of some of his work. I really liked his book Smoke and Mirrors, which is like a series of short stories. And I really loved American Gods. And I remember I read American Gods and I was like, wow, this is one of the best. I'm not really even into like that kind of book generally. But I gave it a chance and I was like, you know what? This book's flipping great. It is a great book. And then I listened to the audible version of it or whatever, which is like, it's not even really, I wouldn't even call it like an audiobook. I mean, it is an audiobook, but it's more than an audiobook. The main guy who's like reading the stuff and doing all the voices, he's incredible. And it has like a really vivid atmosphere. It has like great sound design and you really feel like you're in that world. It's too late for me to refund it now, obviously. And I still have a couple of Neil Gaiman books laying around. What can you do? What can you do? All I can do is to like, I'm just not going to financially support him anymore. Those books, they've been bought, you can't do anything with that now. But, let's be fair, I didn't like Neil Gaiman that much. I'm not like, I wasn't like devastated. And at the end of the day, do you know what? At the end of the day, it's not even important. This is the thing that I find really funny is like people get really bent out of shape about, like I do get it. Like obviously it's like, it sucks. It sucks because when there's a lot of conversations about separating the art from the artist and stuff. Personally, I can't do it. I find it really, really difficult to separate those two things because I do think they are kind of like intrinsically intertwined. If you can do it, that's great for you. But for me, I find it really difficult to engage with somebody's work and not have some kind of thought in my mind of them. Like when Michael Jackson's music comes on, it's like, yeah, I can objectively hear that it's still good. I can feel like myself wanting to dance and stuff. But also I can, in my head, just hear, he's a nonce, he's a nonce, he's a nonce, he's a nonce, he's a nonce. Like it's really, I can't, it ruins it for me. It taints it for me in some degree. And people act like that's like a choice that I'm making or something. Like, oh, why can't you just separate the art from the artist? It's a good song. It's like, yeah. Or they say like, oh, yeah, but, Michael Jackson's not the only person in that. What about Quincy Jones? What about the production? What about this person playing on it? It's like, I get it, but it's not an active choice for me to think he's a nonce, he's a nonce, he's a nonce, he's a nonce, he's a nonce. Like, that's just happening. Oh, yeah, audiobooks. But audiobooks... I feel like even when they are on regular speed, like just 1 times speed, normal speed, I still wonder sometimes if I'm really taking in the information properly. Because I will often not remember ever even listening to an audiobook. And I know I did because my Audible app says that you've listened to it all. I also fall asleep a lot. Like, here's the thing. If you're reading a physical book and you fall asleep, 9 times out of 10, you're going to wake up and the page is still going to be open or it's going to be creased. And then so you can pick up where you left off. And you might even remember the bit that you read up to. But with an audiobook, it's crafty because you fall asleep and then the audiobook just keeps playing. So then you have the audiobook is still going into your subconscious. You're being subliminally educated. And I don't want to be subliminally educated, because then you're going to wake up and you're not going to remember any of it. It's not going to actually go in. But then when you start listening to it again, you're going to go, hold on a minute, I'm having very severe deja vu here. Or then you might guess the ending because you already actually know it. These are the problems with audiobooks, okay? I do not remember how I got on to even talking about books or audiobooks, to be honest with you. This happens a lot to me when I am recording podcasts, is that I find it very difficult to like stay on track on one subject. Like I will sometimes be able to like go off. I like to embrace tangents. You know, like if I'm getting a tangent in my head, I really like to embrace it and see where it goes. But at the same time, I am sometimes able to kind of like keep in one part of my brain, like, oh, that I need to circle back to that thing I was talking about. But sometimes I'll go off so far into a tangent that thing will just, it will be gone forever. So in whatever way I was talking about books, if you can remember, leave a comment or whatever, and I'll talk about it next time. I don't know. I've been reading a bit lately. I can tell that I'm not necessarily in a good place, but I can tell that I'm in a better place when I read a little bit more. I've been continuing to read No Logo by Naomi Klein, who I love. I love Naomi Klein. Naomi Klein is my gal. I've been reading some Mark Fisher. Obviously, I've read Capitalist Realism. I've read it a couple of times. I love Capitalist Realism. But I have also, because here's the thing about Mark Fisher, you hear a lot about capitalist realism. People go on about how great it is, and it is. It's a great book. It's actually, I think, philosophically, sort of like a life-changing milestone of a book. Like in life, sometimes you read books, and sometimes you read a book and you're not quite ready for the book. Like you like it, but you're kind of like, oh, I don't get what all the hype is about. Capitalist realism is one of those. Like the first time I read it, I was like, okay, this is cool and everything. But then the second time I read it, and then like the third time I read it, I was like, oh, I get it now. I feel like I have matured and I am ready for this book. But Capitalist Realism, it really is the Mark Fisher book that everybody goes on about, because obviously it's like the most concise one. It's very short. It's under 100 pages, I think. Might be too hard. It's a short book. But it's very, it's very well edited. It's very like put together and concise. But he has other books that are longer. Like I'm reading a book at the moment about hauntology that he wrote, which is really, really brilliant. Really, really cool. He was such a good writer. That's not a hot take. It's not like I'm the first person to be like, hey guys, you should read Mark Fisher. I didn't discover Mark Fisher, okay? That's like me trying to say to someone, hey, like you should really check out this band Nirvana. I think you'll really like them. But for the record, if you haven't heard the band Nirvana, what are you doing? Listen to Nirvana. So it's Trans History Week this week, apparently. That's what I read on the internet. Obviously, there's no mention of it in any sort of like mainstream capacity. And that's kind of why I get a bit like, I'm not cynical about these things. I would love it if trans people were held in a higher regard in society. I would love it if Trans History Week was considered like a meaningful thing. But because it isn't, I find it very hard to sort of like get excited about. But I gave myself a challenge this week to be like, well, don't be like that. Like, if you want trans history to be a thing, if you want it to be something that is meaningful, like you should engage with it. Rather than just relying on the mainstream to like do anything for you. Because this is the thing, right? For a long time, I'll be honest with you, this is Jen getting real here, okay? For a long time, I resented even having to talk about quote unquote trans issues. You know, my first stand-up hour that I recorded and everything was called Peak Trans, and it was very much about being trans. It was about the trans experience. I personally think it's an underrated gem, but that's just me. I think it's a good experimental hour of stand-up. But after that, you know, I started to sort of like resent the idea of even having to be, you know, that trans voice, you know, having to talk about trans stuff. I wanted to be like, I'm a comedian in my own right. I should be able to talk about whatever I want. And I did, you know, for the last couple of years, that's all I've been doing is talking about silly stuff that isn't even related in any way to trans issues. But recently, obviously, because of the shifting landscape and things feeling quite precarious, I have felt inspired to, emboldened to talk about trans issues again. Because I do care a lot about, I care probably as much as anyone can care. Like, I care so much about trans people. And you know, I care about myself. You know, I care about my place in society, and I want things to be better, and I want things to be better for younger people. And I don't like the direction that the country and a lot of the world is going in at the moment. I do feel like we're shifting into something different. And I know a lot of people are kind of like, don't throw around the term fascist. You don't know what a fascist is. Well, to that, I just say whatever, you know, whatever it is that we're shifting into, whether you want to call it fascism or not, it sucks. I don't like it. It's bad. And I don't want it. And I want things to be better. I am at my core, I think, an optimist. Not every day. A lot of the time I'm not. A lot of the time I'm very pessimistic. But I don't think it's as simple as, are you a pessimist or are you an optimist? I think what I am is, I think my first reaction is always pessimism. I think my first knee jerk is like, I go straight to the worst case scenario. And then I think I have to sort of like, I come around to optimism. I work through it, you know? So basically what I'm saying is that I spent a long time sort of like running away from what I am in terms of like, why not talk about it? Why pretend that it doesn't affect me? Because it does, unfortunately, you know? And, you know, the reason I bring up that whole thing about comedy is because I think at my core, you know, if I'm being completely honest with you, what I really want is, I do want to just be taken on my own terms. Like, I want to have the freedom to talk about whatever I want and not always have to have trans issues be the center of my life. That being said, that is, I think, for me, an unrealistic expectation. I think when you live in a time that is so anti-trans, I think when people are so ignorant and so weirdly hostile towards trans people, I just think that, like, I don't really have a choice. And actually, at a certain point, running away from it and not talking about it, it then just feels like delusional, you know? Like, I'm not out here pretending that I'm not trans. Like, I don't, like, obviously I know I'm a trans person, but I don't think of myself in that way by default. Like, I think of myself as just like a person. As cheesy as that sounds, that's just true. So, like, the limitations that are there for me and that exist for me, like, very, very clearly, I don't often acknowledge them. Like, I do eventually, like, they're hard to avoid, but my first sort of instinct is like, no, I can do that. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, I can't. No one wants to hear it from me, you know? But one thing that I have found, you know, great is the internet. I think it's absolutely wonderful that trans people have access to the internet and that we can be creative on here and have our voices be heard to some degree and speak for ourselves, because God knows, no one is giving us that opportunity in the mainstream. I don't know what I would have done without the internet. There's so many conversations right now about how the internet is dangerous and detrimental and, polluting kids' minds, and the internet is responsible for this and that and adolescence and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know, I don't really buy into that so much. I actually think that the internet is a good thing for the most part. I would bet that the internet has helped more people than it's harmed in the long run. I was one of those people, as a young trans person. As a kid, I really needed the internet to connect and to find myself and understand that, like, the feelings that I was having were not as terrible and as rare and as scary as the mainstream media would have you believe. If the only resources that I had were the ones that were within my home directly, I probably, this probably sounds good to like right-wingers or whatever, but the truth is I probably would have always been too scared to transition. My parents used to buy the Sun newspaper, and I remember some horrendous stuff in that about trans people. And I remember I used to think, when I used to read it, I was like, wow, this is what the world thinks of me. And it's like, you come to realize that actually not really, this is just what like the twisted tabloids think. And the reason I'm talking about that is, I guess, because for Trans History Week, in an effort to embrace it and to try and sort of like be positive, I kind of wanted to talk about Nardia from Big Brother. Nardia Almardada. Do you know Nardia? So this might be more of a sort of British thing, but I personally think that one of the most important trans voices of my generation was Nardia from Big Brother. If you don't know, one of the early seasons of Big Brother, which is obviously the game show where people go and live in a big house and have to do silly tasks and stuff, and then they get like evicted. They had a contestant who was a trans woman, and her name was Nardia, and she went in stealth, essentially. The audience knew, but none of the housemates knew that she was trans. And although there were people in there who speculated, and there were like unkind things, really unkind things in the press, and there were conversations about ethics, and, the show did kind of make fun of her in some degrees, she just proved herself to such a degree. She was just such a shining light of like charisma and personality and joy, and she was funny, and she was unashamedly herself. She was dramatic. My cigarettes, darling. She was by any queer person's metric, an absolute icon. Not only was she so important to positive representation on television, it's like, yeah, like it was uncomfortable, like hearing my family talk about her. Yes, it was uncomfortable hearing the way the press spoke about her, and even the way Davina McCall spoke about her. There was discomfort there. But just seeing someone who I saw myself in, someone who transitioned and was living the life they wanted to live on their own terms successfully, that was like a mind-blowing moment for me. I just remember being absolutely captivated by her and just being like, oh my God, like I can be that person. I can do that. I mean, it's not like I wanted to go on Big Brother or anything, but it was just amazing because she was, people loved her. There were so many people that loved her. And guess what? This is the ultimate sort of twist. She won. She won Big Brother. Can you imagine that today? That would never, ever happen today. And she won Big Brother at a time when, not that it's not okay now, because obviously it seemingly is okay to just be openly transphobic right now. But back then it was, I have to admit, it was like a different kind of transphobia. It was a more sort of like overt kind of like transphobia hasn't gotten better, I don't think, but it definitely has gotten more sophisticated. It's got more like legislative. It's gotten more dog whistly, and in some ways it has gotten quite overt. But it was just different. It was like, I remember there was a newspaper article that came out. It was like a double spread newspaper article, I think in the Sun, but it could have been any of those like tabloid shit rag kind of newspapers. But it was basically like a guide on how to spot a trans woman. And it had like, look at the hands. Are they too big? Check for Adam's apple. Like all that kind of stupid stuff. It was really like grotesque stuff. But even despite all that, not only did she win, she came out to huge rounds of applause. They played her best moments. It was just, I cannot emphasize enough how pivotal that was for me as a teenager. Like, I probably, like, Nardia was like, it was so important because she was someone that you could like literally point to and go, look, it can be okay. Look at Nardia. Nardia is like, it's really difficult. It was really difficult back then because obviously there is trans representation now. There's way more. Like, that's one good thing about nowadays, obviously, is that there's like hundreds of different people you can point to if you're coming out and go, look, like it's not as hard of a life as you think it's going to be. Look, there is hope for trans people. A trans person coming out today as a teenager, they could point to like Hunter Schafer, or they could point to like flipping Kim Petras, They could point to Laverne Cox. I mean, it's like there's so many role models, but back then, all you really had to point to was like, I don't know, like, oh, let me show you on the computer. Look at this porn star. Like, the only thing that I really had back then that I could point to as the best representation that I can remember was like the girl from meatspin.com. Look, Dad, meatspin.com. This could be me. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's not great when you're trying to win over your parents. But Nardia, you could at least say, look, I might win Big Brother one day. What else have I been up to this week? Oh yeah, I went to Hastings. Do you know Hastings? Hastings is a seaside town in the southeast of England. If you know Brighton, I guess it's kind of like Brighton, but not really, because Brighton is like quite queer and stuff, and Hastings is just, it's more like, Hastings is sort of like more old people, but it's still good. I like Hastings. It's all right. But the reason I was going there was for this day festival called Jack on the Green. And what Jack on the Green is it's basically a big kind of pagan thing. It happens in early May, and it's like, it's to bring in the changing of the seasons. It's basically Midsummer or the Wicker Man, but by the coast, like sort of like of England. The UK is in a lot of ways still a very like stuffy country. We're still very like, I don't know, like Catholic-y and Christian-y and stuff. But we do have weird little pockets where we will like embrace kind of pagan traditions in a kind of like, quite sanitized, goofy way. So like Jack on the Green, what it is you go and people dress up and they dance around, and there's like a maypole and stuff, and they play music, and people drink alcohol. And what the Jack is the Jack is this big monster looking thing covered in leaves, and he like hops about, and then there's like a paddock that he has to go into at the end of the day, and then everyone pulls the leaves off of him and chases him. That's sort of the vibe of it. It is very Wicker Man. Like, you will see, there's that scene in Wicker Man, the original Wicker Man, not the weird Nicolas Cage one, the original good one. There's a scene where there's like the Punch and Judy guy, and he's like, like dancing around the town. Like, that happens. The only thing that doesn't happen is there's no ritualistic sacrificial burnings of people, which is a shame, because actually the coast, like the cliffs that it's done on, it's done on like the edge of a cliff. It would be not a cliff, but like a big hill. It would be a really great spot to have a big Wicker Man with loads of animals and people inside of it burning. Not that I want anyone to die, but it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things where when you're there, you do start to get riled up and you do start to think, come on, let's burn somebody. And I don't know, I just feel like, although it is fun as an event, it is a bit of a anticlimax to then not burn anybody and then have to go home on the train. You just feel a bit like, oh, I feel in touch with the past, but I don't quite feel like we quite got there, In fact, you know what? Messing around with fire publicly is something that has kind of stopped, by and large. When I was a kid, I feel like I remember it a lot more. For example, I grew up in an area of Southeast London, and in Southeast London, on fireworks night, there's a thing called Blackheath. Blackheath is a fireworks... Well, Blackheath is a place. Blackheath is like a really beautiful part of Southeast London. And it's called Blackheath. It's near Greenwich Park, if you've ever been there. It's called Blackheath because it was an area, apparently, where a lot of the plague victims were buried, like mass burial site. All these plague victims were buried there. And obviously, they must be great fertilizer because the area is absolutely beautiful now. And every year on Bonfire Night, they would have a huge, sort of legendary fireworks display, okay? Now, keep in mind there that I referred to it as Bonfire Night because that's what we call it, Bonfire Night. And it has that name because we used to do loads of bonfires. And Blackheath, it used to have it always had fireworks, but it also used to have big, elaborate, mad bonfires. And one of the ones that I remember most vividly was there was one where they had built a huge bonfire structure of a, like, organ, like a musical piano organ, like a church organ. And they set it on fire, and then when they set it on fire, loads of people ran out of it dressed as mice. And you would never, ever get that today, because obviously it's incredibly dangerous to do something like that. Incredibly unsafe and dangerous. And I'm not saying that I want people to risk their lives for a bit of frivolous entertainment. No, actually, I am saying that. That is what I'm saying. Like, it's okay when you go to the circus. Like, if you go to the circus, do you think that people aren't risking their lives for frivolous entertainment? That's by definition what the circus is. That's what's amazing about the circus. This is why I always thought it was funny when people got bent out of shape when animals were banned from the circus, because it's like, firstly, not only should animals definitely not be in the circus, that's like evil and cruel, but we don't need them. Like, I honestly am not impressed. Like, don't get me wrong, it's funny seeing a chimp ride a bicycle. I love seeing chimps ride bikes. I love seeing them drive cars. I love seeing chimps do anything that a human does. That it touches something inside me. Like to me, like, that is comedy. It's funny. Chimp smoking a cigarette, hilarious. I don't agree with it. I wouldn't do it myself, wouldn't make a chimp do that. But if I see a video of it, it is so funny. But it's not impressive. Like, I'm not in awe of it. I think it's really funny. I've said that. But I'm not like, wow, like, this is worth the price of the ticket. What the circus is for is it's for seeing people risk their life for no reason. Like, you see someone walking across a tightrope or like doing a backflip off of one of those crazy spinny things or riding a motorcycle around in a circle, and you think, this person's going to die. This person's going to fall off. And if they fall off, they will die. Or at least, like, you know, really hurt themselves. But that's why we're there. We're there for that. Like, we don't want to see them die. But we are there because we're like, but what if they die? Anyway, on that upbeat note, thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a nice rest of your week. And yeah, tune in next week where there'll be another bonus episode for you. I feel like this one was quite rambly. I feel like there's a few things that I didn't really get to cover, but you know, that just leaves more for next week, doesn't it? It's a good system. Anyway, I'm going to go make myself some dinner. Here's what I'm going to have. Pasta, linguine actually, with pesto. Oh no, it's not pesto because I didn't buy pesto. I bought mascarpone sauce. So linguine with mascarpone, and some like mushrooms and garlic bread. What are you having? Leave me a comment. Also, I've been thinking, should I make a Discord? I want to make a Discord. I feel like Discord is cool. I feel like it's the place to be. I'm just worried that if I make a Discord, it's going to get full of like weirdos that I don't like. But I want one. I want like a little room where people can talk about lobotomy world and can like recommend me things and stuff. I'll make one. Let's give it a go. Oh, by the way, hello to the new patrons. We've got 2 new patrons. So everyone say hi. Hi. Anyway, you guys are wicked. Thanks so much. Have a lovely rest of your weekend. And I'll see you next week.